assumes there would have been parties.
Welcome everyone. So welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council for April. The meeting is open to the public and will be live streamed. I'd like to thank all of those in the room today and acknowledge everyone watching Council's social media channels. I acknowledge the Mayor, Portfolio Leader, Councillor Carl, Councillors, the CEO, Brian Pidgeon, General Manager, Stuart Summers, Planning and Development Group. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guybil and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. We have an apology from Councillor Carol Taylor today, and if she's watching at home, we wish her a speedy recovery and look forward to seeing her again. So we move to item number 3. Need a motion to accept her apology. Councillor McDonald, Councillor Antonio, all those in favour? Carried, thank you. So item number 3 is the adoption of amendment number 20. So this has come before us. Councillor Summerfield, did you have a question?
I did, if I could, in relation to Councillor Taylor. She, under the Local Government Act, should be allowed to be engaged in this meeting rather than just watching it. The latest changes to the Local Government Act stated that councils have to provide opportunity for councillors to participate in meetings even though they're not here. So I don't know whether that's been requested at all, but it certainly should be considered.
Well, I'll hand over to the CEO. I don't think it's been requested.
Yeah, that's the council's discretion to choose to do that or not. If that was the case, we'd have to make sure we've all got headsets in to be able to make that happen. Yeah. But we just need to make sure we have appropriate notice so we could make sure the technology was in place for that to occur.
All right, so item number 3, which is the adoption of Amendment 20. So this has come before us a couple of times and it's been approved by the Minister, and now we just have to approve it here at Council. So Shahida, is it? No, Fanush, I beg your pardon, Fanush, thank you, is going to just take us through it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, fellow officers. The report before you considers the adoption of Amendment number 20 to the Planning Scheme, Amendment number 5 to Planning Scheme Policy number 6, Heritage Places, and Amendment number 4 to Planning Scheme Policy number 7, Neighbourhood Character Places. Council proposed the amendments at its ordinary meeting on 17th of December 2019. The details of the amendments can be found in the report. The amendments were publicly notified between 25th of September and 26th of October 2020. A consultation report and the modified amendment were considered and endorsed by Council at its ordinary meeting on 15th of December 2020. On 7th of January 2021, the amendment and the consultation report were sent to the Minister for State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning, requesting approval to adopt the amendment. It is noted that ministerial approval is not required for Council to adopt the amendments to planning scheme policies. On 22nd of February 2021, Council received approval from the Minister to adopt the proposed amendment. In summary, all the requirements for amending the planning scheme have been fulfilled, and the report recommends that Council adopt the amendments. Council must publish a public notice and give notice to every person who made a properly made submission advising the amendments have been adopted. The property owners directly affected by the amendments will also be advised of Council's decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Anish. Is there any questions? Councillor McMahon?
Oh, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I do recall this has come before us, and I just had a question which was originally raised. I just can't remember the answer to it. I think Councillor Shine raised it originally. Why is the property being removed? Amendment number 4.
So,
one in Newtown?
Yes, you're talking about 15 Godswick Street, yes, in Newtown. The dwelling is being demolished, so following that, we will be removing it from the list of neighbourhood character places.
Thanks. Is that?
Any other questions or queries, Councillor Summerfield?
Well, just on that,
If I could just mention to the property mentioned, I put it up on Google Maps and there's new townhouses already there, so that's a bit of an anomaly if we're doing the paperwork now and they've already removed it and built new units, if that's the case, if the Google Map was accurate. So that'd be disappointing if that has occurred. That's not my question, though. Could we find out if that is the case, please? So in relation to the Amendment 20, we're talking about excavating and filling on in the rural zone for water storage. Could you elaborate on that, please? I don't recall what we were covering off on there and whether it's limited to certain areas or we're talking about all rural areas in the region, or...
So my understanding is that we are rephrasing the code that addressed that, just to remove any confusion and misunderstandings about it. But if, for more information, I guess I'll have to ask Heath to answer that.
Yes, please.
The original wording in the scheme was confusing, and state government and council, it was unclear as to who had the responsibility. The state government tends to take responsibility under normal circumstances unless there is a planning scheme in place that places that responsibility in the hands of council. We have clarified the situation in this amendment that it is not council's responsibility but the state government's responsibility to be controlling water in those areas.
And I would agree with that, but so why are we playing in the pond in relation to changes here? Or are we saying in those changes that it's not our responsibility?
Yeah, that's right. We're clarifying that it's not our responsibility but that of the state government. Yep.
That's really good. So I only had one other question, and that was around the heritage overlay aligning with the state government in relation to the heritage register. What is the reason for that? So are we aligning all of our properties with the state government's register? Is that what that is?
Madam Chair, if I may. So we identified that there was an anomaly between the heritage listing under the state register and under council's planning scheme for the property, and so we are amending the planning scheme so that the two align. If I may also respond to the Goswick Street question for Councillor Summerfield, there was a development application made for the construction of units on that site, which included the demolition of the character place on that site. So the approval was issued for the construction of units and the demolition of that character place, and so those units have been constructed with council approval. Given that the house that was on the site is no longer there, it's no longer a character place, and so the amendment recognises that and subsequently removes it from the list. So the site is still in the neighbourhood character overlay, as is the surrounding area. It's just no longer recognised as a specific character place.
Yeah, thank you. I've got one about the sports precinct, but I'm happy for others to have questions.
We'll go to Councillor Shine.
well, yeah, just on that one on Goswick Street again. I take it that it's in a character area as opposed to being a heritage listed and therefore not protected. And therefore, the council approved the demolition of the house because of that. Well, it wasn't the reason why it couldn't approve it. Is that right?
Yes, the planning scheme recognises places of heritage significance and places of character significance. The Goswick Street property was a character place, and the value of its character was assessed in considering the application for the units, and was considered that on balance the demolition of the character place and replacement with units was an appropriate outcome.
Is there a set of standards that citizens can look at to determine the likely attitude of council in relation to assessing whether the character is sufficient to be retained or to be demolished?
Yes, so the planning scheme contains the neighbourhood character overlay code, and that identifies the criteria that must be considered when council is considering an application to demolish a character place. So they are publicly available for people to look at, yes.
I think there would be some disquiet in the public, if a place is in a character, there would be an assumption that it is protected, notwithstanding. Yeah.
Certainly the outcome that the planning scheme seeks is to protect places of character, significance. However, it also identifies that the significance of a place may be subject to individual assessment, and that if, against a set of criteria, it's considered appropriate to demolish that place, then approval would be issued, and that's what's happened in this case.
And that's a matter for council officers. That's not a matter of significance to be taken to this place.
Look, depending on the nature of the circumstances around the application, whether there are objections to that application, it may come before council or may be decided at officer level.
But would there be any objections if it's, any notices have to be put up or anything like that?
Look, I don't know the specifics around that for this particular application. I can only, I believe that the delegation powers are that if there are certain objections, then it needs to come before council, but the General Manager may clarify that.
Before you can demolish character houses, it's an impact assessable application, needs to be advertised. And if I can only assume that it did not trigger, in terms of third-party submissions or whatever, to come to council as an impact assessment application. So one can only assume there may not have been any submissions, or there may have been one. I think the trigger is more than one submission before it comes to council as an impact assessment application. The issue of demolition of character houses has always been with us. Council 5 years ago, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, tightened up the provisions relating to the demolition of character houses, and we really must differentiate between character houses and heritage buildings. They're miles apart. Unfortunately, sometimes in the public's mind, they're one and the same thing, but they're not. And character means not just the building itself. Certainly the style of the house is important, but it's the gardens, it's the fencing, it's the setbacks, the height, the slope of the roof, colour, those sorts of things are character, whereas heritage is very different.
Councillor McMahon, did you have a question?
Oh, no, it was exactly the same. Thanks, Chair. I think there's nothing else to add.
Okay. Councillor Summerfield, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just with the Goswick one, the character on the Google map of the replacement homes, townhouses, units, whatever they are, is nothing like the great outcome we got in Joffrey Street. If you think about, what happened in Joffrey Street, how we removed and built new, and they were built in character with the surrounding homes, whereas we certainly didn't get that at the Goswick Street. So moving forward, hopefully we'll continue to get outcomes like Joffrey. Just with the Charlton Sport Precinct, the submitter in here, could you clarify, are we wanting to acquire land from the submitter?
That's correct, yes.
And they're unwilling, by the read of that?
There are discussions going on between council and the submitter around acquisition, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to get some clarification around the transport noise corridors and the mapping in Appendix, whatever it might be, Appendix 2.
8, isn't it?
So the maps are on Appendix 2, which is page, whatever that might be, 69 or 70 of 575. And just wondered in regard to, that's obviously main roads, that's a road, and wondered where inland rail noise might fit into this planning scheme over time?
The noise corridors are developed by the state government. They trigger requirements in the Queensland Development Code, which is part of the building regulations, so that to make sure that buildings constructed within those corridors appropriately deal with the noise created by the road in most instances. Councillor, I'm not actually sure how the railway lines factor in. I believe that the railway lines are considered part of the transport corridors, so the railway line that runs through Toowoomba would be addressed by those corridors, and in time when the inland rail occurs, the state government anticipate will update the mapping to cover the inland rail route.
Okay, just to follow up, a different subject. The heritage mapping that's on Heritage Overlay, that's Appendix 10 or Attachment 4, no, Appendix 4, Attachment 10, page 149 of 575, looks at, and I understand the Rangeville one, the tourist road, the one out at Cooya. Is there a way that someone looking at this map can see what's changed from this, or is it all the yellow that's changed, that's new on the map?
I don't believe, sorry, I'll just check. There's no change out at Cooya, is there? So the map is, in the report, incorporates the changes that have been made. However, there was no change to the area in Cooya. So the orange, yellow, I'm colourblind. Excuse, pardon me.
Goldie colour.
Great for a planner to be colourblind. So the colour on the map represents the heritage places that are listed. However, what we've given you is the full set of the overlay maps. So there were only a couple of locations that were changed.
In Cooya or overall?
Nothing in Cooya.
Nothing in Cooya?
No.
And the second map was, well, it looks like Toowoomba, CBD.
Yes.
Etc. Is there a way that that someone looking at this could see what was changed?
So when we exhibited these maps, there was notes on the maps that identified what was changing. And they will be available online for people to look at. However, what you're adopting here are the final maps, so we take those notes off.
So someone could see that if they went onto Council's website, they could see what was changed?
Yes.
And that would, that'd be the same for the last map as well, which was aligned with the state heritage, with the tourist
That's
road.
correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Adam.
Councillor Shine?
Yeah, no, thank you. Just on that Cooya one, as a matter of interest, there was seems to be a large area of land. What would be the heritage nature of that? Do you know?
Sorry, Councillor, I don't have that detail at hand, so I'm certainly happy to take that on notice and provide that to you separately. But no, I don't have that information.
It looks like the whole, property of, forest or forest or something. Anyway, if you could find that,
yes,
that'd be good.
Take that on notice.
Can I just ask another one in relation to just a matter for self knowledge? The difference between, if you look at, for example, page 63 of 575, where it indicates the different colours, if you can determine those, between, and it says low density residential, and then a darker pink or brown, a low medium density. What's the difference between low density residential and low medium density residential?
The primary difference is the types of residential development that is supported in the two zones. So the low density residential zone primarily supports detached houses and dual occupancies. Unit development is generally not supported within the low density residential zone. However, the low medium density residential zone supports houses, dual occupancies and units.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bonhoff.
Thanks, Madam Chair. On page 13 of board books, under the financial implications, let me get it. the financial resource implications and specifically compensation under the Planning Act 2016. It says the changes proposed by the amendments have been reviewed and it's considered that the amendments are unlikely to raise compensation claims. And then on page 26 of Board Books, one of the submitters refers to the opportunity to continue family ownership has been foregone because of these proposed amendments. And so my question is that legal advice, has that taken into consideration the submission from that particular group of people?
The position in the report is based on the fact that the property that is subject to that submission is the one that council is seeking to acquire. So if council acquires the property, that is in effect addressing the compensation issue. So if council was successful in acquiring that property, then that would nullify any need to or any potential claim for compensation.
Okay, thank you very much, Heath and Fanush. So can I have someone move the recommendation which is there before you with those 4 points? Councillor McDonald, Councillor Melissa Taylor, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 4 is the extension to the shedded horticulture temporary economic development incentive. And Dave, Quinlan or Stuart is going to take us through that by the look of it.
Yes, Dave unfortunately had another meeting he had to be at. So this is very straightforward, councillors. This is the temporary economic development incentive for intensive horticulture. Council adopted this policy a couple of years ago with a mind to assisting and encouraging the intensive horticulture, which is horticulture or growing of vegetables and other plants under glass, effectively. And it was seen as an industry worthy of encouragement. The interesting point is that a couple of the applications that generated interest in this particular policy have not gone through to be completed at this point in time. However, it's there as an encouragement for people both in the rural areas and maybe urban fringe areas to be looking at this type of development. There are no change to the policy as substantive other than dates. Any questions on this one?
Councillor Shane?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just I noticed it says while the policy has not been broadly utilised, it hasn't been utilised at all.
Quite right.
Had there been one application, would you have described it as being well utilised or something of that nature?
Absolutely.
Something like, yes, Minister, I would have thought. But
No, the application that generated this particular policy initiative is in a rural area, and the proponent at the time was keen to proceed for whatever reason, whether it's COVID or other legitimate business reasons, I don't know, and I don't have to know. They haven't proceeded to a point where they're able to take advantage of this. They've got their planning approvals in place, I understand, but they haven't taken advantage of this policy.
so at what stage, if I could, at what stage, is it designed to take effect in that?
Once it's approved and substantially built, they can then lodge a request. It's when it comes to pay infrastructure. Now, in the case of this particular one I'm talking about, there was only one infrastructure item that was of interest to them, and that was the transport, because it's actually outside in the rural zone. And given that's the situation, there's no sewer, no water, no stormwater services, no parkland fees, so it boils down to just transport. other developments that may be within, say, an industrial zone or other peripheral zones would be in a different situation. They could, in fact, attract a discount for a greater extent of or range of services.
Just one last, if I could. With respect to these types of schemes where we've allocated $1 million in this instance and other sums elsewhere, is that money parked separate and, from a accounting point of view, which would therefore prevent us from using that money for other purposes in the meantime? Perhaps I should know the answer to that.
I feel that I should too. I guess it's a foregone.
Exactly. That's what it is. It's not money we don't have.
It's not spending money, it's foregone. Yep. However, in terms of accounting and keeping the books balanced, there's a recognition of that potential revenues foregone, but how that would be accounted for is way beyond...
It's not money we have, it's foregone in the future. Yeah, right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Von Hoff, did you have a question? Yes.
I did, thanks, Madam Chair. The report talks about how there are currently 3 approved developments for intensive horticulture that could potentially take up the policy, and as far as I could see, those 3 approved developments aren't listed as involved parties in this report. And I would have thought that that would have been an important inclusion in the report, because we're talking about specifically the approvals that have been granted and $1 million potentially that they could take up. Can I have a comment about the decision not to include the involved parties, please?
That's a very interesting question. I'm not sure that they're any more interested than any other potential user out there of this policy. It's a broad policy for covers the entire region. There are 3 approvals at the moment, yes, but there are other horticultural activities going on within the region as well that could intensify. So I'm not sure that they would qualify for that.
It's just that the report mentions them specifically.
Yeah, the report does, yeah. It's interesting. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other probably should have put them in as interested, but I don't think it's critical to this consideration of the policy as a broad, high-level policy by Council. Thank you for the point. I'll remember that one for next time.
Councillor O'Shea.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question to General Manager Summers, I suppose, is we put up this policy in December 2019, and as you've mentioned, to say that it's been whatever the words before, it hasn't been utilised since, so, what's that, 14, 15 odd months, and we haven't seen any take up on it. When we talk about the pressures and what we see across our region, do we have confidence that this is a good reason to want to extend this? Like, or is there other parts across our region through the planning and development stage where we think, because $1 million is a lot of money to incentivise something, and I just wonder, is the thought process behind that, with a lot of other things that we've talked about around incentives, with whether it's shop top living or all other sorts of things, and I know that's still to come, but I suppose just the merits or the ideas around wanting to keep this going when we've already been going for 15 odd months and had 0 take up. Not against it, but I think,
Yeah, look, I think, the point you make is legitimate. I think, I'm not sure to what degree the COVID virus has had an effect on this, but Council's thinking was that intensive horticultural activities are desirable in terms of water use, intensification of land use. It's not spreading across extensive areas of fertile land, and the it tends to generate far more employment, permanent employment, than traditional vegetable growing. So it was seen as a benefit. The benefit's still there, the encouragement's still there, and I guess the word incentive is there. It's to incentivise the possibility of people thinking that we will go down that line. I doubt that the fact that they can get a discount on their infrastructure charges is going to be the major driver of whether they do or whether they don't proceed with an intensive horticultural activity. It's really going to get down to the bottom line. But I think it's useful to have it there. It would be my answer. But I guess the world's not going to stop spinning if we decided not to extend it.
And I think to add to that, there was the flurry of these applications, and we didn't really know how to deal with the request for discount of infrastructure charges. That's where the genesis of this. So, sorry, Councillor O'Shea, you.
Yeah, no, and I understand that point, and I suppose though it's again something. If we do extend this through till December 2022, there's obviously another option there. We look at what the uptake is in that period, and
absolutely
decide the benefits of it moving forward.
Yep.
Okay, all extinguished with your questions. So can I have someone move the recommendation that we extend the temporary economic incentive until December 2022? Councillor Summerfield, Councillor Antonio, all those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Stuart, I think you're staying there for item number 5, the Development Assessment Regional Development Statistics Report for February 2021.
Yes, councillors, basically I'll be quick on this, but I will take you to graph 4, which is the graphs that Councillor Shine asked to be produced. I'm not sure, did I point this out last time? I may have. But it's quite an interesting graph, and it demonstrates quite clearly the issues that we've been facing in the couple of years running up to the current period, and then the result of the federal government incentive on housing. It's quite dramatic. And the tall blue line is the ceiling of the Lees estate. That's why that was basically, I think, sealed almost as one estate, and consequently it's quite a noticeable tower in that graph, in that histogram. But overall, in February, Council approved, through the RAL process, 63 new lots and sealed 119 lots. That's up. Yeah, sorry. And then in January, that compares to January where there were no lots and 12 sealed. Now, January, of course, is traditional, very low month because the building industry and everyone else, most people tend to go on holidays. Housing, in February, 102 new dwellings were approved as of about 2 weeks ago. As I said, I think last time, it's quite difficult with housing, and particularly at the moment where the building certifiers are very busy. They're tending to not be as prompt in sending in the paperwork which indicates that they've issued approvals on housing. But as I say, of about 2 weeks ago, we had 102 new dwellings approved and 6 new units in February. The building values are interesting. In January, there's 37.7 million, roughly, and in February it's 45.3 or $45.4 million. So they're pretty reasonable figures. I might leave it there. Any questions in relation to the stats?
Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you to GM. Stuart, can you just confirm page 167, so it's your executive summary, the 5th paragraph down, just want to check on the 3rd line. Halfway through it says in January 2021 these figures were 295 and 254 respectively. Should that just be February? Just those numbers are consistent with February, but not January.
Sorry, I'm having trouble. What number was that, page number?
Page 167.
Oh, 67.
167.
57?
167.
167, sorry. Okay, confusion.
Paragraph 5, third line down,
3, 4, 5.
halfway along. It's just
End of February.
just for correctness in the report. I just want to make sure that should be January. It should be February.
Which paragraph are you talking about?
Paragraph
Decision-making?
5.
Or which one's that? Is it building approvals? Is that what you're...
Took paragraph 5 we're talking about, page 167. Paragraph 5 starts with, for the last 12 months, the monthly average number of such and such so-and-so. Third line down, it says, in January 2021, these figures were 295, 294 and 254, respectfully. But
In January 21, these figures were 294, and at the end of February... So, and you're suggesting what?
well, I'm suggesting that the information above that says that it was actually, during the month of February, they were 294.
Oh, okay. So,
I think that January should be February.
You're right. Yeah, it's around the wrong way. Yes, I'll get that corrected.
Just for correctness.
Yeah,
Well done. Thank you. Any
well picked up.
Okay. Very good. Then can I have
Happy to
someone
move it.
the recommendation that we adopt the report? Thank you. Councillor McDonald, Councillor O'Shea, all those in favour? Thank you. It's carried. Can I have
Thanks,
someone
Councillor.
move that we adjourn? Our next item is confidential. So adjourn. Councillor McMahon, Councillor Summerfield, all those in favour? Carried. Thank you. And we go to water and waste.
Three consonants.
Who we are. We right, Brendan, to continue? Yep. All right, so welcome to the Water and Waste Committee meeting of Toowoomba Regional Council for April. I'd like to acknowledge Portfolio Leader Councillor Summerfield, the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, my council colleagues, Acting Manager Ray Stevenson back there. This meeting is, and all staff who are in the room. This meeting's open to the public and will also be live streamed. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse the lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We move on to item 2, attendance including apologies, leave of absence and declarations of conflict of interest. I don't have any of those to move, so we'll go on to item 3, the implement... Oh, apologies, we have to do Councillor Taylor again. So she's an absence or an apology? An apology. Can I, Councillor...
Can I indicate, please, I think that I'll be leaving at about 10 o'clock to attend a funeral. I think Councillor Summerfield's in the same boat.
No, I actually approached the family and said that if you have large numbers, I'm happy to withdraw my... so I'm not attending. Thank you.
I'll be leaving at approximately 10 o'clock.
Okay, so we have we'll deal with Councillor Carol Taylor at first instance. Can I have a mover, Councillor McDonald, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan for an apology for Councillor Carol Taylor? All in favour? Thank you. Then we'll move on to the Mayor, who is an apology from around 10 o'clock to attend a funeral. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Carl and Councillor Melissa Taylor, all those in favour? Thank you. And I guess an acknowledgement that Councillor Summerfield has spoken with the family and has foregone that the attendance of that important funeral for our community. So we move on to item 3 on the agenda, the implementation of smoke testing inspection program for the Southern District, July to October 2021. Ray, you're standing up. That indicates that you're going to be presenting this. Is that correct? Sorry, Ray, would you mind just maybe coming up? It's hard to hear you.
Just left the text.
Thank you, councillors. Just apologies. Phil was actually just scooting across the road, so he'd be 20 seconds or so.
Would you like to provide some light entertainment while we wait?
Oh, I don't think I know the words there.
Councillor Carl.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It's pretty standard report and procedure that council goes through as a requirement.
It is, yes.
Subject to any questions or and that raised, I'm happy to move. But anyway.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm happy to second it.
Okay. Are there any questions from councillors that would like to be they'd like answered? In which case, we've got a mover, we've got a seconder. Can I ask all of those in favour?
Very good.
And please pass on my thanks to Phil for...
And that's carried without dissent. Thanks very much, Ray. Thanks to Phil in your absence.
It is exactly the same as last year.
So that brings the April meeting to a conclusion. The time's 9:46. Thank you.
See you, Ray.
This is how I dressed for the occasion.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Thank you. It's my first committee meeting
Morning.
as chair. Welcome to the Infrastructure Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council for April 2021. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed, so welcome everyone online. I'd also like to welcome everyone in the room today and acknowledge everyone watching via the Council's social media channels. I'd also like to acknowledge the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, and acknowledge General Manager Mike Brady, the Chair of Infrastructure, Carol Taylor, in her absence, and council officers, in particular Rod Betts, the Manager of Transport and Drainage Planning. I'd like to open the meeting and acknowledge the traditional owners. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, the Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. There is an apology for Carol Taylor today. I actually would like to acknowledge Carol, and if you're watching, Carol, we're thinking of you and sending you healing thoughts today. So I'd like a mover. Councillor Von Hoff, seconder. Councillor McDonald, all in favour? Carried. There's no leave of absence required noting, and there's no declarations. So now I'd like to hand over to General Manager Mike Brady. Yes. to review the policy 2.06, the naming, renaming of council assets.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Good morning, councillors.
Morning, Mike.
Morning.
The first report, councillors, review of naming, renaming of council assets policy. This is quite a standard process to bring various policies back to council every number of years, 3 to 5 years in this case, closer to 5. The asset naming, renaming of council assets policies obviously been reviewed over a number since the time I've been here, probably 2 or 3 times by council. So it's not that many changes. There's a few minor amendments to the policy. Some of those include a bit of clarification in regards to the naming, ensuring from a history perspective, those that are persons that have criminal histories or been discredited or dishonoured are not included in any of the council's naming. So that's probably a key little change. Other than that, council, the policy itself hasn't really changed from what it has been, and it's been working quite well. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, any of the naming that we have done has been done, and there's been minimal contention. So I'd put this to your councillors.
Any questions? Councillor Summerfield.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks for that, Mike. I just wondered in relation to the policy on Board Books 555, naming of parks not done until all stages of the development are delivered has been added, and I can't help but think of the avenues where we named a park, and very nicely done too, I might add. That park was beautifully named out there and long before the development is finished, and I just wonder why we would limit ourselves now under this policy making this amendment, and whether it couldn't just be generally rather than until all stages are delivered. I don't understand the concept of that.
Look, in essence, I can confirm that, councillors, but I think the word, it's on page 5, is it? Just
Page 5, yes, please. And about halfway down, a bit over halfway down. Down there in the blue, yeah, the second dot point.
well, we could have the word generally until all stages of the developments are delivered, and obviously policies are there as a guidance to councillors. If council at any time wishes to do something slightly outside the policy, obviously through resolution of council it can always change. So having the word generally until all stages of development, or in, I would not see it as being a major issue.
Well, I think it allows the flexibility, and I think that's, if we get it right in the first place, it saves having to come back and make an amendment later on and delay processes to amend a policy. So I would really appreciate the support to have the word generally, or whatever relevant word is appropriate, so that there's flexibility in there around naming it during the development, or when it's completed, whatever happens.
Yeah, look, I don't believe that should be a major issue. We'll work on the basis that the word generally would be put in, and we could confirm that by ordinary meeting.
Can I just make a note on that? It does actually say until all stages of the development are delivered, or until it can be demonstrated. So does that "or" satisfy your point, Councillor Summerfield? Or
it can be named any time. Seems to cover it.
I just don't see the point in limiting that, because if you look at the avenues, I think they only had one lot developed when they named theirs, and that's saying significantly.
I think the drafting of that is sufficiently wide, where it says "or" until it can be demonstrated, that a significant portion of the community surrounding the park exists to facilitate appropriate community input to the naming of the process. It's fairly, if you go to a community consultation process, it doesn't mean that it has to be that particular development, in that case, or in most cases, there's a wider community consultation process where they consider the history of that particular site as one of the major drivers as well, not usually the specific development results in the naming of that. So it is relatively wide there, I thought, but council may wish to change it if they wish to.
If I could respond, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. And I agree, Brian, and generally, most cases for all of our developments, that would be the case. But we do have the example of the avenues. And I think given that example is there, and given that the fast growing land development at the moment, there could be other examples of this happening. So I just don't see why we would limit ourselves unnecessarily and not add the word generally.
As I said, I don't think the inclusion of the word would be of any detriment to what the policy is trying to achieve, or vice versa. You know, that said, if that's what council wants, happy to include that word. It's not a major issue.
No, thank you.
I think Deputy Mayor would like to speak on that point.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted clarification. Part of the naming process would be that you have done some community consultation. That's part of the application process. So I actually don't even think you need that second dot point, to be honest. I think it's superfluous to the policy and how we do it, because irrespective of whether it's named at the start or at the finish, you still have to go through that community consultation phase.
Yeah.
No, that's correct. All naming, be it roads or parks, go through a consultation phase.
So
I suppose what the intent, and I could call on General Manager Hauser to comment in respect to parks and specifically, just so that if there is a particular reason, Nick, if I could ask you to maybe comment on that small change.
Welcome, General Manager Nick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors. And through you, Chair, councillors, I think that the inclusion of the word generally would not cause an overwhelming amount of detriment to the intent of the policy. I think the risk that we run by supporting the naming of parks before a community exists around it is what we're trying to address here, is addressing that risk to ensure that we've got good buy-in from the community and ownership from the community, that this community exists and they can be involved in the consultation process. If we're ahead of the game, so to speak, and proposing to name parks before that community exists, there is a risk, and you make your own assessment of what the level of that risk is, and it'll change depending on the development that we're at. I think that circumstances where this would occur are very few. Councillor Summerfield, you've named the avenues. That's about Carly Hibbard Park, I think, is probably another one that was named reasonably early, but they're the only two that I can recall in recent times. I think generally most applications are for parks that carry the default name, which is the park would be named after the street with which it shares its longest road frontage, so it might be Smith Street Park, and it's those type of applications that we receive more of. But they're my comments for what they're worth. I think that there's limited risk associated with either arrangement. I think I agree with the CEO. I think the drafting is sufficiently broad to allow an application to come to council before the development occurs, and we would conduct our consultation and report back to you appropriately.
Thank you. I've got a few other questions, but is there anyone that would like to make comment on that particular point before we move to those other questions? Councillor Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Not a biggie for me, but I'm just thinking, flipping the coin the other way. And I particularly think of a new subdivision in a growth area where a park may very well be named after some local heritage or local identities or a local theme. I think most people who move into those areas, and I think we've all been part of those areas at some stage, move there because we want to take on the character and feel and some of the local identity. That's some of the stuff that we like about the choice that we make as far as we live. So I'm not hard and fast on, particularly in those greenfield areas or new subdivision, that it should be consultation. I think people come there with an expectation there is part of an environment with local heritage, culture and a number of things. So it's not a big one for me. I'm happy to go either way, but I think the policy needs to be very broad in its definitions to accommodate both scenarios, I think.
So general issue.
Through you, Chair, I think the policy captures that very well, Councillor Carl, particularly under Section 4, content in the policy, the common principles for naming an asset, which, cover often every aspect. Our policy is in line with and consistent, not only with probably many other council similar policies, but policies of the state as well in regards to naming of assets and things like that. So the approach we take here at Toowoomba Regional Council, be it parks, be it roads, is one that is common, and that not only in the state of Queensland, but I know generally across Australia, in essence, very, very similar approaches. So it's a fairly standardised process to go through. It does include a level of community consultation, and obviously that level of consultation is dependent on, in some respects, to the asset being named.
Thank you. Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So under this policy, how it currently stands, if the avenues was to occur today, an example, if the the process was to occur today, this policy would deny the opportunity to have named that park when we did. And if councillors are happy to go along with that, then that's fine. That's what democracy is all around. But if you add the word generally, it allows the flexibility that things like the avenues process could occur. It's not hard. As you mentioned, Mr Brady, thank you.
I'm happy for the word generally to be included. I don't think that's going to make or break anything at all. I think, but the policy, particularly for naming of park assets, those namings all come by council in any case. So if and when an application is made, irrespective of the timing of that application, the policy brings it through the council process. So it's a resolution of council, be it at the start of development or be it at the end when the request is made. So that just sort of gives you some more assurance, I suppose, but one word, I'm sure, is not an issue.
Thank you. Any more questions on that particular point? No? Councillor O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mike. My question, it's probably a minor one, but one that sort of struck me going through the track changes of the policy. So I'm on 552 of 575. It's in section 3 here, principles. I was just curious around, so we take out we amend 6.1.2, and effectively, well not effectively, exactly all we do is that we add in the word genuine. So instead of being implement effective community consultation, etc., it becomes implement effective and genuine community consultation processes. So I suppose my question is, what does that mean? Or what does that mean we're going to do differently?
Apologies, Councillor. I'm just finding the point that you...
So yeah, it's 552 of 575. It's in the track changes document.
Yeah.
Section 3, which is principles. 6.1.2, the bottom one in the red that's been struck out.
The principles.
suppose, yeah, so, you know, I mean, we talk about one of the most important things we do with council is around, anything we're doing is around consultation. It's something we've heard many a time in the past. A lot of different examples where we say maybe we could have done that better, or we should have consulted differently, or whatever that may be. So it's just, I suppose, the curiosity around adding that word. So does that mean that there is a different approach, or how does that change, I suppose, what we're going to do differently by adding that word?
Yeah, a simple answer to this one, actually. It's our corporate plan changed between the last policy and this policy, and the principles are reflective of the elements, how the relevant points out of the corporate plan. So that's the basis of the principles. So that's why there's the difference in the numbering and there. So those are those first three, which have now been deleted, were the old references in the corporate plan that had relevance to this policy. And so that's where, from principal's point of view, those other ones have come in.
So it's just a wording change. It's not a change of anything.
No change in intent. No, it's just capturing the principles from where it's relevant to, where this policy is relevant to our corporate plan.
Yep. Okay.
Maybe the title, maybe corporate plan reference rather than principles might be useful. It's something I can take back. So it's more relevant that way.
Councillor McMahon.
Thanks, Chair. Mike, my question is on the next page, 553, with that addition of the dot point where we are allowed to rename an asset if the person or body after which it's been named has been discredited or dishonoured. Fair enough. I just was wondering, is that a standard inclusion, or have we got stuff in mind?
No, it's number one, we don't have anything in mind at this point in time. Number two, I think where this has come about probably in the last 4 or 5 years is how society has reviewed the standing of persons that have been credited or discredited, and this would be by resolution of council, obviously, if this was to occur. So any renaming or of that would obviously be through a process in the resolution council. I think the likelihood of that occurring is extremely low.
Right. No, follow-up, Chair, if I may. My only issue is, as you were saying, discredited or dishonoured according to who. I don't think those are necessarily objective terms. So, you know, if society's going that way, that's fine. And I notice, you know, examples all around the world where this is happening, some of them very valid, but you're saying it would come before us if we were going
most
to
definitely.
Thank you.
Most definitely.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, sorry.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Of all the things that you thought you're going to be quizzed endlessly on, General Manager, I probably didn't think it was going to be this one. Just from being involved with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Committee last term, part of the discussion was around wording within policy, and I might be wrong, but my impression was that they weren't happy with the term traditional owners, that that Aboriginal people don't own the land. I might am open to correction, but I wouldn't. I thought that was one of the recommendations, that they weren't happy with that terminology.
That wording, we use 4.1, first dot point under 4.1 does use the word Indigenous in reference to...
This is on 553, sorry, Mike.
Righto,
Yep.
553.
Sort of about
We could...
top third.
Sorry. I'm looking at just a couple of things at once here. Okay, so we could change that to... to ensure there is no conflict with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders cultural or cultural significance of the or Indigenous cultural heritage significance. I mean, again, the word, well, I can take that back and confirm internally if that word's relevant or appropriate. I'm, again, very happy to, if we wish to change that traditional age to Indigenous culture significance, or for that matter,
just not sure what the sort of accepted terms or what people were sort of what the agreed terminology was. But I didn't think it was owners anyway.
Look, I can just double check on that, councillors, if you like, between now and ordinary meeting, that wording, and if appropriate, come back and just make the amendment as required.
Okay, thanks. Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just supporting the conversation, I guess, from Councillor O'Sullivan to Councillor Megan, I think the conversation was more around the usage of the term traditional custodians as opposed to traditional owners. But the advisory group, the members of the advisory group suggested that it was not one or the other, but could be used either, depending on the situation or the desire of that particular group at the time. So traditional owners or traditional custodians, and Councillor Carr might be able to comment, but that's my recollection, that it was more a conversation at the advisory committee of, and a diverse view on that, I have to say. It wasn't one or the other, but certainly a preference was made at that group, not by majority, but that it could be either or. And perhaps the General Manager checks with Lisa Goodman between now and next week just to confirm that.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Well, I'd like to put the motion forward with the changing of point 4.3, the second dot point, and add the word generally. So adopt the policy with that amendment. Councillor Sommerfield, seconder. Councillor McDonald, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Are you up again for this one?
I am.
Number 4, request for bitumen sealing of Merritts Creek Road, Merritts Creek. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, councillors. This report's sort of on a section of road to the north, actually between Kabala and Hampton, heads northward. Merritts Creek Road can act as a bit of a, in inverted commas, a shortcut sometimes for those that wish to travel between Crow's Nest and Toowoomba. So it does get a little bit of rat running occasionally, a little bit of through traffic. That said, it is a gravel road. It's got a pretty average horizontal and vertical alignment to it, so it's not dissimilar to the majority of our gravel road network. We have over a number of years had quite a number of requests from time to time, or a request here and there from time to time to have it sealed, and recently with a minor development approval that sort of sparked another level of interest into getting some road upgrades. Unfortunately, as council's well aware, the opportunity to upgrade and seal our gravel road network is one of a significant budgetary challenge, and it doesn't matter which year that occurs, and will probably continue to be. So when we look at these and some of the process and policy approaches that we've taken to work through any sorts of requests, we have come up with an approach which we've brought to council in previous times, and we go through that process, that multi-criteria analysis process. it really doesn't flag, in respect to Merris Creek Road, it doesn't really flag it too much to the top of the pile when compared to other roads in our network. And from that perspective, and the budgetary constraints that we do have, you know, at this point in time, across our region, it's unlikely that this road would be upgraded in any time in the near future, and probably for that matter in the medium to longer term as well, unless there was significant development and changes in use that would predicate a reconsideration. So, councillors, the recommendation is fairly straightforward. It's basically giving the people along that road some certainty of where council's position is. That said, obviously, the final outcome is always one for council to determine. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager Mike. Questions, Councillor McMahon?
Thanks, Chair. I have a few questions. Thanks, Mike. I remember sitting around this table when we originally did the development application for the water bottling and selling on this road, and I remember quite clearly we were asked to talk in relation to the farm and the capabilities as it has, and we were told that the B double, the once a day, using this road wouldn't severely make the road worse. Here we are, you know, less than a year later, asking it to be bitumened. To what extent has the truck, if any, from that water caused this request for bitumen upgrade?
It's probably, obviously any traffic on the road does have some effect. We've gone through a period of drought and different other things over the last couple of years. Look, one truck a day is not a significant impact. The perception that a truck runs up there or there's something new on a road that occurs is probably more the issue. And another reason that people may put forward as trying to give their, you know, in their argument as into why the road should be sealed, which is, you know, very understandable. I can understand, you know, it's a sort of a level of not hobby farms, but small lot farming in down that section of road. So it's a little bit more intense than other sections in various areas, but the level of traffic usage is still relatively low, and one that is comparable to many similar roads in our network. So to look at sort of sealing this compared to others, and as you would have seen in the report, there is a bit of a comparison, attachment 3, which was picked up, you may have seen in today's paper. It was picked up in today's paper. The essence of attachment 3. So if you've seen that in the Chronicle today, where it talks about the top 10 roads and the cost of $23.3 million. So, you know, as I introduced the report, the ability for council to go anywhere close to funding that at this point in time is probably pretty low.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Follow up, Chair, sorry, 2 more questions. Does the road ever, do gravel roads such as this ever get graded, which may help short term instead of the bitumen?
Most definitely.
Yeah, cool.
Yes.
Look, of course in my portfolio, the same as any, we all have projects that fall just under the line which we wish were above the line, and I think once we start playing around with the prioritisation model, you know, it's disappointing in everyone's portfolio that these projects do fall under the line. Certainly in mine, though, with our parks or whatever, when it's below the line, it's probably got a good chance of being in there next year. And talking these things with the 48s are kind of in, and this is, you know, outside by 2 decimal places really. Does that, in ISG, does that mean it'll be in next year? And you're saying it may not, for the short to medium term, ever get bitumen? Can you just comment on how that works for you guys?
Yeah, look, councillors, these is what we call sort of new/upgrade from a system, and I did a very short presentation to council last week on where we sit budgetary-wise. The chance of even number 1 occurring without external funding, grant funding or of the like, and we have occasionally we are able to get some external funding, is quite unlikely in the foreseeable future from a budgetary perspective. It is, yeah, we at this point, to put these roads in the budget would be at the sufferance of something else.
So just to clarify that, 1 will be a stretch without external funding, and we're asked to today decide on, well, probably one that's 11 or 12.
Correct, and that's the like many requests that we get for our road network. I've brought this forward because this has had a significant number of requests, and we are trying to put the position forward, you know, the council's position to bed, so to speak, where we actually stand, and to be upfront with our community in respect to what's affordable and what's not affordable.
Thanks, Mike, and I welcome those concerns. They're very valid. I think, you know, you do well with your budget, and it's stretched every year, so thank you for clarifying that.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Madam Chair. 2 questions, if I might. The first is a question, given the increased development in Hampton and Ravensbourne in recent years, when was the last time a traffic assessment, and forgive me if I've missed it in the report, when was the last time a traffic assessment was done on that road? Was it ahead of that, the extraction development last year?
Probably 2 years is probably 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Yep.
It could have been more recently. Yeah, we've got a program, traffic counting, happening across the region annually. It doesn't pick every road up annually, but we get back to various road networks. This Merritts Creek Road has been pretty stable for the last probably the last 10 years. You know, there's been probably a little bit of growth. As I said, it does get used occasionally as a bit of a shortcut, but the road itself's got quite an average sort of vertical and horizontal alignment. So this is one to take it from where it is to a decent road does add to the cost.
Okay, thank you. My second question, Madam Chair, relates to that table of the top 10 ranked regional roads. And we do have, we have the assessment scores and we have the costs. So basically it's going to cost more than $23 million to do those 10 roads that rank above Merritts Creek according to the assessment, which takes into account, you know, school buses running on it, the gradient, the number of cars and the travel on it, the danger score, I guess. And speaking to what Councillor McMahon was just saying, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I think that the community wants to have an idea of timeframes. So we're looking at a couple of $1 million a year, that's what we can put in, something in the order of 2, but then we are dependent on that external funding. So just for that top 10 that we've got there, we're looking at more than 10 years, correct, to complete those roads if we do not get external funding. And that's to highlight the extent to which our budget is constrained.
It's probably potentially worse than that, from the point of view that these don't even get to be considered by council from a budgetary point of view. Generally, where, you know, they stay as the unfunded capital. They stay based on capital's councils would be good to do list. So I can't, we cannot, you know, unless council makes a resolution from a budgetary perspective going forward that will invest into this type of parts of the network, there is no way we can give any sort of timeline to when a road may get considered for upgrading and sealing.
So then a subsequent, Madam Chair, say if we just take the number one position on that table, you're saying the only way that is going to be up for funding is if we put it forward for external. Our budget doesn't take into account even that one being upgraded, let alone 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then the ones that fall just below the line.
Yeah, it'd have to be basically a resolution of council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And that's why this report's here today. Ultimately, we're saying as officers that we can't afford to do this work unless council says that this takes priority over other things.
Councillor Cole.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I wonder if we couldn't bring up attachment 2 of 3, the locality map, and it's on page 574 of 575 in board books. I understand the constraints on a budget and how we're trying to deal with a lot more issues than we have finance. However, I want to try and propose, and it mightn't be exactly palatable to some of the residents along there, but I'm thinking of if I lived along there, what would I appreciate to try and mitigate some of the impacts? And I want to define impacts. Mr. Brady, I have some local knowledge of that road and I've traversed it a few times, and I can assure you that rat running is a frequent daily event in morning times when people go to work and in the evening times when they go home. And the reason why I say that is because you can cut 10 to 15 minutes off. See the top of the map? If we go to the top of the map, Wendy, you can just see the blue line there, Peachy McLagan Road, goes across to Gumbungie. That's a feeder road that picks up everyone that comes, nearly everyone that the majority of people that come from Gumbungie Way will turn off down this road because they know they can speed. Now, why I want to suggest what I want to, and I think it's affordable, is people can't use their rainwater tanks. I've been in an area where I couldn't use my rainwater tank because of dust. They have to pump water separately to their tanks to have water to drink. So their rainwater tanks, for some, will be rendered useless because of the amount of dust and the speed at which non-local traffic traverse this road. So my suggestion would be that we investigate, or we look at the possibility of installing local traffic only signs at either end of this road, on the Peachy McLagan Road and on the New England Highway and on the Hampton Road. I think there's one on the Hampton Road now. And that we look at lowering the speed limit. Now, I'm not the engineer. I'll let you guys have a look at that, but I think we should disincentivise people who are traversing this rather than using a sealed highway. And if they were doing a reasonable speed, I don't think the dust would be as great a problem, nor would the road maintenance, because we appreciate that corrugation on a road that isn't formed properly with a camber only increases the problem with weather and wheel rutting as it rains. So speed, I don't know, I'm not the road designer, but I would imagine it would make it a lot worse than it could be with a more desirable lower speed limit, of which I reckon most of those residents would respect each other along that road and do an appropriate speed. I've passed people on that road and they've been at speed and showered me with rocks. I don't think we should do nothing. I'm imploring council to consider local traffic only signs at either end and lowering the speed limit, and I'm happy to take advice from the officers as to what that speed limit should be, but I'd love to see it at 60 k's. It'd really be a disincentive for people other than locals using that road.
And the residents.
Sorry.
Well, that's a suggestion. It may not be practical, but I think if the prospects of us doing nothing inside of 10 years and we are prepared to do road maintenance when people are driving at 100 k's or in excess along that road, I don't think that's a good solution. And number one, for the residents, and number two, for our budget on road maintenance.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'd like to suggest we investigate those options, or at least look at those options for those residents.
Through your chair. Look, the installation of local traffic only signs is not an issue. We can probably do that. It's really, I don't think it really deters anyone, to be perfectly honest. Local traffic only signs, there's no actual sort of regulation behind that, if you'd like, so I mean, anybody can still drive through a local traffic only sign. It doesn't it really speaks to those that probably don't use it now and are respectful of the people that live along there in the road. In regards to speed, we don't speed control our gravel road network because of the variance of condition can change weather and different things like that. I take it on board that there's sections through that 8 kilometres where somebody could quite easily travel towards 100 kilometres an hour, but there's many sections through there, down through the creeks and the bottom end near Hampton Road and things like that, that the curvilinear alignment and the vertical alignment are pretty poor. So the average speed would still, through that section, I know it does distance-wise. This is where people get the saving, is more the distance in time, so they save a little bit of time that way, and also through Hampton Township as well. The other element with speed is, the obvious speed control. You put a sign up that says there's a certain speed for this section of road, even on a sealed network, but does it get policed or enforced, and being able to encourage that to happen is, again, that's a challenge. But it's really people driving with respect for others.
Yeah, which isn't happening, Mr. Brady, and I merely say, look at a speed. Okay, I don't get all the technical stuff, but if there's a way in which we can limit speed, the reason why I say that, it gives the residents along that road the opportunity to call the local police and say, hey, there's people speeding here. Now, they don't have that.
Yeah, understand.
And so, yeah, I just think it's a sad prospect to not, have your drinking water contaminated by people who are doing the wrong thing, and they're not locals. They're, as I said, I've been on that road, experienced through traffic, and I'm aware of a time saving.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions, but I think Councillor Von Hoff on that point.
Yeah, on that point, I would really want to see what consult with the locals and see what they have to say about the speed limits, because I don't want to further frustrate their existences, and I think that that's something that we would really have to take into consideration.
Yeah. Look, just to, if I may, the regulations which come through the MUTCD, the Manual Uniform Traffic Control Devices, doesn't permit speed limit signs on gravel roads. So it's, rather than spend time consulting and things like that. over time, we have looked at sections of sealed road networks, particularly in that Hampton, Kabala areas, and we have done speed reviews, and once the road gets sealed, we can look at a speed relevant, and that's what our low-cost seal approach is. It's trying to stay with the existing alignments and different things like that, and we actually do those sorts of works.
On that point? Have you got a question on that point?
Well, indirectly.
I've got a few other questions ahead of you.
That's
fine. Councillor Shine.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just a couple, but the first one I think has probably been answered, and that was, do all of these come to council? I think your answer was it was because of the number of people that signed that petition or whatever it was. It was the number of people involved that you thought it was wise to bring it to council, or is it just normal procedure for application for bitumenisation of a road to come to council?
We'll probably try and put this one to bed to a certain extent. It's been to council, when I say it, officers have responded to the requests in the past number of years, and we keep responding and saying, unfortunately, it's not, in the foreseeable future. We don't see it occurring. Probably there's the latest correspondence, did bring up, as Councillor McMahon pointed out, the issue around the development that council approved, and tried to put that up as a further argument to why this road should get reconsidered. So rather than going back and forth, the aim is to get a firm decision from council.
Okay. My other question is, and I think Councillor Von Hoff referred to a list of criteria, but I just haven't been able to find that list. But the main criteria in determining the order of preference, could you give us an idea of what the main ones are, 3 or 4 top ones? And if it includes the volume of traffic, is it just the residents in that area, or do you take into account the through traffic that, for example, Councillor Bill referred to as well?
All the points you stated are included, but I'll just ask Rod to make comment on the MCA itself. Thanks, Rod.
Yes, Councillor Shine, there's 12 to 15 criteria with a weighted scoring process that's usually only 1 or 2 officers do these assessments, so we try and maintain a level of consistency of interpretation and all that with it. So relatively speaking, I guess, different people can score things a bit differently, but we try and keep it consistent and do a bit of moderation that way. I think what that list shows is, as Mike said, many of these roads fall into a very similar sort of category and prioritisation. And if you look at the top 10, 35 kilometres or so of road, just bear in mind that there's 3,300 kilometres of gravel road out there, so we're looking at a very small fraction of a much bigger picture. I think in the report I mentioned how many requests we've currently got on the list. It's been going about 2 years now. We're up to about 150, and we're about 2/3 of the way through the scoring process. So the likelihood of a couple of roads potentially popping into that top 10 over time is quite possible. It is a difficult sort of area. I mean, I'll probably be happy. There's a fair bit of detail in it. It's probably an information session type nature of approach, and probably a few things around, just our general road network upgrade policy and extension policy and where we go with that as well. So potentially a future information session if the councillors would like that.
But just at the top of your head, what would be, say, the top 2 or 3 criteria be?
Certainly speed, volumes, whether it's a through road or, is there other traffic in the area rather than just local traffic, school bus routes, general curvilinear nature of the road. There's potential for dust nuisance. There's quite a number of factors in there that are taken into account. The actual assessment process itself doesn't take into account the matter of contributions. We haven't sought contributions or asked the question about the potential for contributions in this area. We don't actively seek those out. We tend to wait for people to come to us with a need who want to contribute, and those cases are invariably reported to council, that they're single reports if there is a council contribution involved.
But you mean, if I'm right, contribution, you mean monetary contribution?
Yes.
From like a developer normally, or is that what you mean?
Or from a property owner wishing to improve access to their land and prepared to contribute substantially towards that if they're the primary person benefiting. Yeah.
Just at the cost of doing a road, there'd be few and far between, you'd think.
I mean, there is the potential for a resident with a particular dust concern to approach us about a contribution for sealing 100 or 150 metres of the road. That can end up with a bit of a patchwork approach, so you'll have a bit of bitumen, a bit of gravel, a bit of bitumen, a bit of gravel. It's not a great outcome, but there are instances of that historically around the region for sure.
Might be one out of Wairina, is there, of recent time?
Yeah, you will obviously see them out around the place, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rod.
Yeah, just two roads that came through contributions of recent times is Cameron's Road, or out there, Cameron Sharps Road there, which is, and also Roberts Road, out Linthorpe Way. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Just off the top of your head, like talking about roads that keep coming back and their assessment score. So, Anduramba Road and Rosenberger Road, are they, like, do you know sort of off your top of your head where they're on the assessment score at all?
Number one, they both have resolutions of council not to seal them, okay, or not to upgrade them. So those resolutions are the current resolutions. So they're not on the list.
Okay. And can I just have a follow-up? So, Mr Brady, you talked about the low-cost seals and, you know, we had that resolution a couple of years ago about doing a certain amount of work. Can you kind of just remind me what that is? And those costs, those indicative costs that you've got there of doing these top 10, are they at a lower cost, what do you call it? Lower cost seals, or is that some sort of, you know, Taj Mahal type road?
They're probably more towards the lower cost seal. So first of all, the issue around the budget, there's not a resolution that actually is there in respect to the desire of council to have certain amount of funding each year. Council's done that element in respect to the budget on an annual basis. So that's a small challenge in itself, because there's uncertainty whether that would follow through in future years. So be it footpaths, be it low-cost seals for townships and villages, or be it you know, a want or a desire to see a program of gravel road upgrading. So that there's no specific resolution that states that needs to form part of the budget presentation to council. So all those desires are actually put into the prioritisation model, and unfortunately when it comes in comparison to renewals, grant funded programs and different other works to date, those sorts of works tend to fall below the line. So from a funding perspective. Yeah, so that has, if that is something council wants to make as something more directive, it would have to be a report and a resolution going via council. To date, we've done it more from a annual budgetary consideration perspective.
Okay, I must remember that incorrectly, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and then these costings that you've got here for these top 10, that is on a, what sort of road is that? That's a
2-lane sealed road. Yeah, but typically about a 6 metre seal on 8 or thereabouts. So similar to what we asked for in our planning scheme in rural residential type areas.
And so then comparatively, what's a low-cost seal? What's the size of that road or whatever?
Well, that's in. We do look at each location specifically on its merits, because what we're trying to do with low-cost seal is not have to invest significantly into alignment improvements, be it vertical or horizontal alignment improvements. So we'll look at what is achievable at the low end of cost. So there's sections that we've done, Fernbank Road out of Kabala, where because of the larger trees and trying to keep, without having to take them out of the road reserve, we actually designed it to be a 60km/h section of road. When it comes to villages and towns, that can be somewhat different. Davidson Lane at Hampton, we wanted to wander a single lane through the trees, and just really it was done as much as anything a dust suppression for that. Whereas another section of road, we were able to, in the road reserve, have it as 2 lanes. So it just depends on each circumstance, but the intent is to try to minimise the level of investment, but keep it relevant to the use of that section of road.
Just to add, they're based on actual costs of through the
Yeah.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, just in regard to the costing, the variance between, an estimate 400,000 per kilometre and 650,000 per kilometre, is the 400,000 an antiquated number, or is it usage of better technology that we should be investing in? I know we trialled a seal machine at one stage. I'm just wondering whether we could perhaps get some information on the accuracy of the 400,000 per kilometre, or are we kidding ourselves and it's not that anymore and might have been back in 2017 or whatever the case is, and whether technology is something we should be investing in to achieve some of these things based on the cost of actually undertaking the works.
Yeah, so the costings that you've got in front of you today are based on 3 or 4 more recent projects over the last couple of years. Look, as I said, each location is quite different, and that's why we've given the range. When we do these costings that you have here, they're a guesstimate costing, okay? So we haven't done any detailed design, we haven't done even concept design. We're basically taking the length of the road, knowledge of that sort of construction in that area, and saying, okay, it's going to be in this ballpark. So those estimates there are giving you a guidance, a reasonable guidance on what it would cost. So if, you go to, it really does depend on the level of work we do on that section of road. If we, need to get into earthworks, widening works, if there's intersections, drainage can have a very significant impact on a section of road. All those sorts of things come in, but that doesn't get worked into any further detail than this until we say, yes, we want to move forward with one of those particular projects.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mike, just following up on the technology side of things and noting that we have trialled some and wondered whether we shouldn't be putting some attention on recycled products or whatever it may be, and machinery to enable us to achieve a greater outcome for the community at a lower cost, depending on how much this is, but over time. Just looking at the program in front of us with those top 10, one could argue that an investment in some technology that could expedite but produce at a lower cost might be something this council should consider investing in.
I'd love to be able to find that opportunity. What I can say, each one of these sections of road is looked at from a cost-effective construction perspective. The technology that we have and we've brought in over the years We try to, mitigate through, be it the type of materials we use or be it the plant and equipment we use. We look at we're not bringing in many cases high standard, the type of gravel that we bring in. We work when we're looking at a low cost seal. We work with a higher level of risk, and when I say that there may be some premature failure of elements in the road sooner than later from a design life point of view. We are, from an engineering perspective, once we start looking at sealing it and knowing sort of and understanding the vehicle usage, we've got to mitigate that by making sure that we are following appropriate design standards. So we then look at extended design domain. We look at it's also got to, in the different standards that are used. So we're looking at where there is room to move on a spectrum. We are looking at the lower end of that spectrum, be it material type, be it the way things are done. But, if there's different technologies. Over the years, we've brought in various technologies like the grader control systems and different things started to bring in about 10 years ago. That probably saved us $100,000 a kilometre. So where we can, we do bring in the appropriate technology.
Councillor Von Hoff? Oh, sorry,
Thanks.
yes, are you finished, Councillor McDonald?
Oh, I'm finished, but I'd like us to investigate further investment in technology for this council to consider ways in which we can perhaps look at, not just for these items, but other items. So whether we're doing enough R&D in that area, I'm not sure, and perhaps the General Manager can come back to us at a further time to go through that. And it's probably not just in ISG, it's in right across council, but this particular subject's before us today. So I just wonder how much we're investing in that side of the business, and perhaps it's a deeper and more robust discussion for another day.
I'd be happy to do a information session on technology in road construction. Councillors?
Thank you. Councillor Von Hoff. Oh.
Was there something? Yeah.
No.
Was there something further?
No, I don't think so. Was there?
No.
Okay. Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Brady, if there's a road traffic incident on one of these roads, does that trigger a reassessment of the ranking? Do we work with QPS and that triggers re-looking at the rankings?
Not specifically within this MCA perspective. We do, from a black spot perspective, we are looking across our network to where accidents have been.
But it has to trigger that black spot.
No,
level?
we don't. Our gravel, probably because the traffic volumes generally are very low, and for that matter, the number of incidences are pretty low as well. So, again, unfortunately, from a black spot perspective, they tend to be in zones, be it around the city from a traffic volume perspective, intersections and different things like that, or in our rural ones, they tend to be more on the sealed road network, speed and traffic volume related.
That's what I would have expected, but you know, on these 10/11/12 roads that we're looking at here today in this report, it wouldn't, a road crash wouldn't trigger a reassessment of the ranking.
It may make us review it from a different perspective, from a different sort of safety perspective. And it's not saying that these aren't deserving of being sealed at some point in time. It's just unfortunately we do have a budgetary constraint as an organisation.
Any further questions? No. Okay. Yes, Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Look, albeit I understand the reasoning why we can't put signs speed signs on road network, that's a given. But, I note your comments about local traffic only, but, maybe it might make a greater percentage of people to want to do the right thing. Could we do that as a small measure to try and deal with people? I know most people, if they saw a local traffic only sign and they're not from that area, would probably observe that. You're not going to stop the habitual rat runners that live locally in the further northern parts of the region in relation to this. But I don't know. I think if we could do that, it would possibly make.
I'm happy for us to, through your chair, if it's okay. I'm happy for us to look at what sort of preventative signage we might be able to put there. I do understand, with GPS systems and that in vehicles now, they pick the shortest route, be it sealed and unsealed. It doesn't differentiate. So if you're going north and you don't know the area, there's a highly likelihood on your GPS it'll run you down Merritts Creek Road if you were travelling from Highfields to Crow's Nest. So, if a little bit of signage prevents a few, well, maybe that's a positive from that perspective.
Thank you. Okay, so recommendation. Did you want to wrap up, Mike?
I'm happy for council to resolve.
Okay, so looking at the recommendation, all those in favour?
Need a mover and a seconder.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Rookie mistake. May I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor McDonald, seconder. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Well, that's the end of the Infrastructure Group Services Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for coming. We will have a break now for 15 minutes for morning tea. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Do we need to... Don't need to worry. Thanks, everyone, for coming back. So the resumption of the Planning and Development meeting, can I have someone move that we go into confidential session? Councillor O'Shea, Councillor McDonald, all those in favour? Thank you. We
All
right,
those in
Brendan? All those in favour? Item number 7 is the recommendation is in 2 parts: resolve to settle the P&E Court Appeal 2891, and the second part that we delegate to the CEO authority to negotiate with the appellant. Can I have someone move the recommendation, please? Councillor McDonald, Councillor McMahon, all those in favour? Carried. Item number 8 is the Development Services Planning and Environment Court Appeals and Compensations Claim. Can I have someone move that report be noted, please? Councillor Bonhoff, Councillor McMahon, all those in favour? And item number 9, which is the Regional Enforcement Actions for March 2021. Can I have someone move that the report be noted? Councillor McDonald again, and Councillor O'Shea. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. And that is the end of the Planning and Development meeting. Thank you.